Hey everyone. So we are almost through with this fast, and it's crazy to think that this much time has gone by already. It is interesting when I found out when this video was going to be playing because it has to do with this timing, has to do with what happened last year during our fasting in my own life. Typically, when I know that our church is getting ready to go through this season of prayer and fasting, I start asking the Lord what it is that I should be fasting for. And I'll usually get some kind of a word, or the Lord will just share something about what I need to work on in my own life. And then I dig into fasting during that time with that. But last year, when I asked the Lord what I should be fasting about or fasting for, I didn't hear anything. I heard silence. And so as the days got closer and the videos started and then the devotionals started being released, I just told myself, okay, well, God just must want me to do this as a spiritual discipline. I could always use more of that in my life. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this and, see what the Lord does. So probably more than, I guess it was about halfway or a little bit more than halfway into the fasting, something happened one day just with a good friend of mine. I was watching an interaction with her and another friend of hers. And I just thought to myself, wow, I just had this realization, like my relationships don't look like that. And I want them to. And I really did feel some jealousy that day. And I was like, Lord, my relationships don't look like this. And I want them to. And it was just one of those breath prayers, went through the rest of my day, probably didn't give it another thought. But that night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned. I did all the things that I usually try to do when I can't sleep, or read something, trying to make myself tired. And it took a while, but I finally said, okay, Lord, is this you? Are you keeping me awake for a certain reason? And is there somebody that I need to pray for? Because that'll happen sometimes too. And all of a sudden I had this flashback of something that happened to me in my life, probably almost 20 years ago. And I hadn't thought about this thing in maybe almost 20 years ago. And I was like, oh, I didn't like that. I didn't know where it came from. And then I had another flashback from this situation that happened. And it was very shocking and very hurtful. And I immediately just started crying and just said, Lord, please take this away from me. I don't want to think about this. And it happened again. And by this point, I was really upset. And so I started asking Jesus, like, Lord, please, like, why are you showing this to me? Why am I thinking about this now? And I heard that gentle voice in my heart say, because I need you to. I had told the Lord, I left that behind in my life when I followed you here. And the Lord said, and you also left a piece of yourself there, and it's hindering your ministry and it's hindering your relationships. And until I heal that in you, I can't move you forward with where I want you to be. And so that night was really tough, reliving some of that and going through that with Jesus. But at that moment, I also remembered Psalm 139. And if you grew up in the church, or if you grew up reading your Bible, you're probably very familiar with Psalm 139. If you're new to the Bible, this passage is definitely just something that'll blow your mind. Psalm 139:1 says, O Lord, you have examined my heart and you know everything about me. The Hebrew language actually in verse 1 concerning the word know has a depth to it that we can hardly wrap our minds around. That God has searched us out through and through and arrived at a full knowledge of our spiritual condition. The passage goes on to talk about also how God knows our thoughts in specific circumstances long before we ever have them. Verse 7 talks about how we can never escape from his spirit. Verse 12 says that even in darkness, we can't hide from him. So despite knowing both the wonderful and the darkest parts of us, verse 17 says that God's thoughts about us are precious. They can't be numbered. We are known by God. We're known by him on a level that no human can ever know us, not even ourselves. And even more than that, we are loved. There are numerous scriptures about God's love. I know one of my favorites is 1 John 3:1. It says, see what kind of love the Father has given to us that we could be called children of God, and so we are. You are his child, you are known, and you are loved today. He's the author of your story, and he's mapping out every page. He's redeeming every chapter that needs redemption and editing every word for his glory. He knows you and he loves you so much that he won't let you stay as you are. There's glory at stake in this, friends, and it's his. That night, I walked through a difficult event again. I walked through that with Jesus and surrendered all of it to him. A weight that I didn't even know that I was carrying was lifted that night, so much so that within 24 and then 48 hours, I shared with my husband and I shared with a good friend about the joy that I found in my life in this situation that I didn't even know that I needed. I couldn't believe all that God had done. And the Lord even opened a door that week to something that I never would have stepped into on my own. So during this time of prayer and fasting, know that he is not wasting any of this time. It's precious to him. Even though you're this late into the fast, and God can do something new at any moment. He knows you and he loves you. So my challenge to you today is to don't be afraid to stop and pray and ask him to search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. Psalm 139.